An early look at the Bears' top free agent targets. What's up, guys? The offseason is upon us, and free agency is just weeks away. I've been hard at work at narrowing down the Bears' targets for the upcoming free agent frenzy. Today, I'm going to show you the 10 players I believe should be highest on Ryan Poles' radar, an early look at Bears free agency. I'll do another video as we get closer and know who is actually going to hit the market, but let's go ahead and get right into it. At number 10 is the only player on this list who is 30 years old, pass rusher Hassan Reddick. Reddick is a guy who has 59 career sacks and is a two-time Pro Bowler. He had 4 straight years of producing at least 11 sacks a season. Before holding out and missing time in 2024, he only ended up starting 2 games and recording just 1 sack this year with the Jets. But he is a guy who still has a lot to offer as a pass rusher. From 2020 to 2023, Reddick had 255 total pressures, averaging 64 a season, and he recorded 50 plus sacks over that 4 year span. If we could sign him to a 1 year deal around $10 to $12 million, which is what Sport Track suggests he should get, that would allow us to draft a pass rusher to develop behind him while still upgrading the defensive line in a major way immediately. But let's move on to the younger options. At number 9, we have Colts guard Will Fries. The 25-year-old is developing into one of the better young interior linemen in the league. He played tackle at Penn State, but he successfully converted to guard in the NFL. He has the size and athleticism, scoring a 9.14 to fit what the Bears look for. His biggest concern right now is that he broke his leg in week 5 last season, and whether or not he's healthy yet is unknown. His injury status muddles the situation a bit, but he's young, talented, and one of the better linemen potentially hitting the free agent market. Keep an eye on this guy as well. At number 8 is a prospect who, coming out of college, was possibly the best defensive end I have ever graded. Unfortunately, injuries have held Chase Young back from realizing his potential, but he's still only 25 years old, and he spent last season working underneath Dennis Allen in New Orleans. On top of that, he's now 2 full years removed from his torn ACL, and he's just now starting to enter his prime. If he's ever going to realize his potential, now might be his best opportunity. Chase Young is extremely talented, and reuniting him with former teammate Montez Sweat and former coach Dennis Allen could definitely help lure him to Chicago. I think Ryan Poles is definitely interested in him. There are reports he initially was looking into Chase Young when he ended up trading for Montez Sweat. So keep an eye on the athletic freak out of Ohio State. I would love to have Chase Young on this team. This is a guy that PFF credited with 7 sacks and 66 pressures in 2024. Both would have led the Chicago Bears this season. I honestly have always been a fan of Chase Young. At number 7 is a guy who's potentially one of only 2 options on free agency who would actually be an upgrade at the left tackle position. Other than Ronnie Stanley, who is over 30 years old, Alaric Jackson from the Rams enters the market at just age 26. I believe Jackson is an underrated starter. He only allowed 3 sacks last season and just 22 pressures on the year. He graded out as the 18th best tackle in the NFL with a 78.3 grade, and he comes from Sean McVay's system in Los Angeles. Alaric moves well for being 6'7" and 286 pounds, but he did test limited athletically, scoring just a 3.25 on the RAS. I still think Braxton Jones might get another year at left tackle, but if Ryan Poles wants to upgrade the position, Alaric Jackson is a guy to keep an eye on. At number 6 is my biggest surprise on the list. I initially wanted to put Ronnie Stanley here, but I left him off because he's over the age of 30, and I included safety Javon Holland from the Dolphins. This guy has the potential to be one of the best safeties in the entire league, and he's only 24 years old. I think there's a good chance the Dolphins find a way to keep him, but if Holland does hit free agency, he's a guy I would definitely be interested in. I know we have Kevin Byard and Jaquan Brisker, but both players are entering the final years of their contracts, And I think having Javon Holland and Jaquan Brisker could potentially be the best safety duo in the NFL a year or two from now. This is probably unlikely, but I couldn't help but dream. At number 5 is a guy who could be our answer at the 3 technique position. I made a video on this guy already. Lions defensive tackle Levi Onwuzurike. He's only 26 years old, and he would allow Gervon Dexter to rotate all over the defensive line. This is a guy I really like. Keep an eye out for another ex-Lion. At number 4, though, I have mammoth offensive guard Mekhi Becton, who's coming off a Super Bowl win with the Eagles. His first 3 seasons in the NFL, he played left tackle for the Jets, and he was basically considered a bust. But he turned his career around after moving inside to right guard for the Eagles. He's only 25 years old, and he fits the Bears' biggest need on the interior of the offensive line. And he's a guy who could end up being our number 1 target, depending on who actually ends up hitting free agency. Keep an eye on Mekhi Becton. And then at number 3, I have a guy who might be Ryan Poles' real number 1 target, an athletic freak, and the only major upgrade that could be available at the center position. Drew Dahlman is a perfect fit for the Chicago Bears. Another guy I've already made a video on. If he was just a little bit better as a pass blocker, he'd easily be my number 1 target. But Drew Dahlman is already one of the best run blocking centers in the NFL. He would instantly upgrade the position, and he's a guy I would love to see in a Chicago Bears uniform. At number 2, I have pass rusher Josh Sweat, another guy coming off a Super Bowl win in which he had 2.5 sacks. I think he could be re-signed in Philly, but there is definitely a chance this guy hits the market. He's only 27 years old, and he would be a huge addition to this defensive line. He has 25.5 sacks over the last 3 years, and he would fit perfectly across from Montez, giving the Bears sweat and sweat at the edges. This guy's young, productive, and fits everything we're looking for as a pass rusher. Keep an eye on Josh Sweat. And then at number 1, probably to no surprise, it's Chiefs guard Trey Smith, who I think is easily the best potential free agent on the market. Don't overthink this one, guys. If he hits free agency, I would want Ryan Poles to do whatever it takes to bring him to Chicago. I know people are overreacting, seeing him lose a couple of reps in the Super Bowl, but he didn't allow a single sack all season long. He is a stud guard and would instantly upgrade our offensive line, and he'd become the best player in our front 5 the moment he signed. In fact, think about this possibility. Having Trey Smith and Darnell Wright on the right side of our O-line would rival the best right sides of any O-line in the league. I think Trey Smith to the Bears would be an absolute dream come true. If he hits free agency, please get it done, Ryan Poles. But let's go ahead and take a look at the top 10 overall. You can see everyone's size and how the list shakes out here. 9 of the 10 players are in the trenches, with 1 safety making the list. This is still very early, but also you'll see there are 0 running backs on this list, and you will not see me talking about a running back when it comes to free agency. We have DeAndre Swift, Roschon Johnson, and Ian Wheeler. If we add another running back, it needs to come from the draft, not free agency. And then a couple of honorable mentions, some guys who didn't make my top 10. Khalil Mack should probably be on that list. I just don't know how realistic it is right now, considering Ryan Poles is the guy who traded him out of Chicago, but I would not be against a reunion if Khalil was interested. But he's probably going to want too much money, and no way should the Bears give Mack another $100+ million contract. Sorry, Khalil. But another guy I have to talk about is Ronnie Stanley. He's probably the second best free agent offensive lineman, right up there with Trey Smith, but he's 30 years old and he'll be turning 31 very soon. He did bounce back from an injury 2 seasons ago and had one of his better years in 2024. I do think Stanley has some good football left, and if we're going to upgrade at left tackle, this guy is definitely on my short list and probably my number 1 option. I just didn't want to include many players over the age of 30, but Stanley is definitely a guy to watch. I just have more faith in Braxton Jones than most of the media. And then I wanted to mention Kevin Zeitler as well. Another 30-plus-year-old offensive lineman, but he did play with Ben Johnson last year, and he's better than anything we've had at guard since Ryan Poles has been here. Zeitler would only be a band-aid, but he'd be a really good short-term option. I also left two Dallas Cowboy free agents off the list. One is Osa Odighizuwa, the defensive tackle. He's just 26 years old and could potentially be at the very top of my list, but his asking price is rumored to be around $21 million per season, and I think he either returns to the Cowboys or he follows Dan Quinn to Washington. So for right now, I just didn't have him on my list. But the other honorable mention is Cowboys edge rusher DeMarcus Lawrence. I have no idea what happens with Lawrence, but he's so talented that I had to at least mention him. Things should really heat up over the next couple of weeks, and we'll find out which guys are actually going to hit the market. But those are my top 10 early targets that the Chicago Bears should be keeping an eye on. The NFL Combine is fast approaching, and then free agency will be upon us. I will continue scouting this year's class and narrowing down my list of players as guys get re-signed and possibly even franchise tagged. Stay tuned. Let me know your guys' thoughts on this top 10. Please hit that like button for me to support the channel. And until next time, bear down.